Welcome to Vermonters in Business, where we highlight some of the very best business leaders in our state and the amazing things they're doing in their communities. People of Vermont, welcome to Vermonters in Business, where our mission is to highlight the businesses and business leaders in our state that are doing outstanding work in both of their work and in their communities. We have an outstanding show today. I am your co-host, Drew Kinney. I am a seventh generation Vermonter, a business owner in the state, and an investor in technology. Joining me today is our co-host, Travis Spencer. He is a serial entrepreneur, a local business enthusiast, a Boston sports almanac, and around here we know him as a world-class insurance agent. Travis, how are we doing today?
Doing great. Thanks, Drew. Looking forward to it.
Got any hot takes for us today?
I do. I actually have a hot take. I thought about this, and we have a great guest here who works with startups and entrepreneurs and technology, and it's been on my mind ever since I got my dog, and I have these little, poop bags. Are the poop bags really better for the environment than just letting the poop sit on the ground?
It's a good question.
Someone needs to do the research and the study for this, because I'm doing this every day. I'm like, this can't be better.
We'll have somebody in the comments that will bring up some biodegradable ones, I'm sure.
Well, mine are supposedly supposed to be biodegradable, but I still don't know if that's better than just leaving the poop out in the woods.
The worst case scenario, though, is the people that bag it and then set it down to pick up on the way back, and then
that never happens.
Yeah, and then you just have a bag of poop sitting on the trail,
or hanging on the tree or whatever.
So that's my hot thought for that.
All right, well, that's a good one. I like it. So, as Travis mentioned, we've got a great show today. Joining us today is Sam Roach-Gerber. Hopefully I didn't botch the last name.
Nailed it.
All right, perfect. She is the Vice President at the Vermont Center of Emerging Technologies. She's originally from Amherst, Massachusetts, and she currently resides in Essex Town with her husband, Jeremy, and daughter? Son. Lachlan. Yes, perfect.
Nailed it.
I meant to clarify that earlier, but I didn't.
Good.
So
No worries. He's only 2.5.
Yeah, and we're lucky today because she also has a podcast, so she has a lot of empathy for us doing what we do as we stumble through it.
Well, I apologize ahead of time if I just start asking you guys questions.
That's fine. You can flip into host mode. That's great. Yeah.
It works for us.
How long have you been at the Vermont Center of Emerging Technologies?
For 8 years.
8 years.
Which I always joke, for a millennial is, it's got to be record-breaking, right?
Pretty much.
I know.
Yeah. And before that?
So before VCET, I worked for Vermont Farm Table, which is a local company. They used to have a shop on College Street in Burlington. Now they're e-commerce, but it's all Vermont-made, beautiful, handmade furniture. They do tables and benches and chairs, accessories and things, and they do residential, but they mostly specialize in sort of commercial and hospitality stuff, so hotels and really large orders, and that's where I really kind of cut my teeth. It was my first full-time job, and worked for Dustin and Jess Glasgow, a husband-wife team. Learned a ton there and really fell in love with startups. And then I was there for about 3 years and was looking to move on and do something new, and just had a really kind of serendipitous move into VCET.
Awesome. Very cool. So, as we do with every show, we start with something called the Vermont Hot Seat. Ooh. Are you ready for the Vermont Hot Seat questions?
I don't know, but send it.
Let's jump into it. Yeah. All right. Pancakes or waffles? What are you having with your Vermont maple syrup?
Waffles.
All right. Making a run again.
It is.
A perfect day for you. Is it a winter day at the mountain or a summer day at the lake?
Summer day at the lake.
All right. And it's your birthday dinner. You can go anywhere in the state. Where are you going?
Honey Road in Burlington.
I love that spot. It is a good one.
Yeah. Are you taking me here after?
Yeah, right. Well, we'll get a reservation a month from now.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I know.
What is your creamy order on a hot summer day?
Oh, just a small maple creamy.
Yeah, from
classic. Burlington Bay.
Burlington Bay. Yeah, it is a classic.
It's you think it's too easy to be the best, but...
Yeah. It's actually good, too. Yeah,
it's very good, yeah.
Yep, you can't go wrong. Well, that's it. That's all the Vermont Hot Seat is. So, yeah, you pass.
Pretty straightforward. Maple creamy with a huge lead in the creamy department.
Yeah, from pretty much everywhere. But I guess we should have guessed that, huh?
Yeah. Given where we are.
That's when I've been in Vermont long enough is that I don't call it soft serve anymore.
Yeah. Exactly. When did you first come to Vermont?
So I moved to Vermont in 2013.
Okay.
I went to Northeastern University for my undergrad in Boston, and quickly realized I was not a city person. I loved Northeastern and loved being a stone's throw from Fenway, obviously. And so I just had a ton of fun, but realized like this is not where I want to live. And my now husband, Jeremy, felt the same. He went to school in Worcester, Mass. And we were like, where should we go? What do we do? And we both were kind of in a place where we just put everything we had into college and sports, and we wanted to live somewhere we wanted to be. And so I think with like a lot of folks our age, we said, is that going to be Portland, Maine or Burlington, Vermont? Because we wanted like good music, good beer, like fun outdoor activities, but a smaller town vibe. And we ended up going to Burlington first just because a bunch of our friends went to UVM. We knew people here. And we just instantly fell in love. It was like the second time I had ever been to Burlington. And that kind of sealed the deal. And I think we both thought like, oh, we'll do this for a couple of years and then we'll move elsewhere. And that was almost 11 years ago. So
you hit on a hot topic item for us, which is sports. What's the sports?
Okay. So my husband played baseball in college at Clark, and then I did 1 year of Division I field hockey at Northeastern, and really didn't know what I was getting myself into. So I ended up switching to club, which was a great fit, and we were, went to nationals every year and just had a really good time. It was closer to a D3 experience than what I had done my freshman year. So I still play field hockey.
Balance in there.
Yes, exactly. Great. Mental health was a little bit better. I still play field hockey every summer. A women's league at UVM, which is really fun.
So I didn't even know that was a thing.
Well, I gotta ask the big field hockey question that I always have is turf. So did you play on high school? Grass was in high school, and then I'm assuming Northeastern had a turf field.
I thought you were going to ask me about the other side of the stick. That's usually the question that I get. So high school I played on basically a meadow, and it was tough. And then I did club all throughout high school, so I played on mostly Astro and Sem field turf. And then when you get to the college level, it's pretty much always AstroTurf.
But I watched the game on AstroTurf, and I'm like, it's got to be so much faster.
It's really like the bane of my existence that in the U.S. we don't watch. First of all, there's not like men's field hockey, which is so much fun to watch. And playing on AstroTurf, it's a completely different game than watching like 12-year-olds play on grass. So I recommend everyone go look out like, the Dutch men's league and just... It's so much fun. It's such a cool game.
And once you figured out what obstruction is, it's all over.
There you go.
It's the most difficult thing to understand.
Travis, I'm blown away. Look at you.
We had, growing up, I grew up in the Essex area. I went to school at ADL. And there was a boy that moved there from, I think, like South Africa or something like that. And he played on the field hockey team because back where he was from, like that was the main sport. Everybody played. And he was great. He played all the way. And then I think in high school, they kind of shut him down and said you weren't allowed to keep playing.
It makes no sense to me that it's like a women's sport in the U.S. Like everywhere else, it's like the number like 2 or 3 men's sport as well. So anyone can play field hockey. So maybe we should hit the turf sometime.
I don't know if I could play it, but those middle school days.
You play golf. It's true. It's similar.
Cheaper too.
Awesome. All right, Travis, let's jump into it.
All right. So I guess the big question right out of the gate. What's VCET?
So VCET is a really special organization. I'm super proud of what we do. So VCET is a nonprofit. We are an organization designed to help businesses start and scale in Vermont. So the core of what we do is really helping early stage tech companies scale as quickly as possible. And we do that in a number of ways. We started in 2005, and we're very much more of like an incubator style. So we were on UVM's campus. We worked with mostly commercializing technologies out of the university, took equity from those companies. It was very, very structured, and it was effective, but it was a really expensive program to run. And this is a time where we were kind of shifting from traditional economic development to entrepreneurship, right? It started to become hot. And so in 2007, our current president, David Bradbury, came in and kind of looked at the structure of the program and what was happening with entrepreneurship, nationwide, and said, I think we need to be a little bit more flexible. I think we need to talk to the entrepreneurs and really figure out what are the key things that they need right now. And 3 things sort of emerged from that. It was advice from people that knew what they were doing or had done it before, capital at an early stage and flexible space.
Yep.
And so we built our kind of new business model around those three things. And so we've always had some sort of shared co-working space. Right now it's our location we opened in 2014 on Main Street in Burlington. And then we always do advising. So we will advise any entrepreneur in the state, regardless of stage or industry. So even though we do specialize in tech or tech-enabled businesses, we will meet with anyone.
Okay.
And we work really closely with other organizations like, the SBDC to make sure that the entrepreneurs that come to us are getting the right help. And then the final piece is the capital. So we're also a traditional venture capital firm, and that is sort of a subsidiary of the nonprofit. So it's a little bit separate, but our funds are evergreen funds. So what we make, we put back in to make future investments in other companies.
Cool.
And what stage are most of the companies at when they're coming to you? Are these people coming, I need help with a business plan, or are they already started and they need help getting to that next level?
Yeah, great question. So we always say we'll work with you till you're bought or buried. So we like to really see things through. Some of our portfolio companies we've been invested in for a decade. And so that I think is a little bit unusual. We are pretty patient capital. But people come to us, all the way from like the seed of an idea all the way to like, I have this thing and I want, this person came to me with an acquisition offer and I don't know what to do. Yep. So it really is kind of everything. I think personally, I really love the ideation phase, that early stage where you think you have something, but you really are looking to validate it. That's what I love doing and probably the bulk of what we do.
And any size, business or?
Yeah, I think, there's such I think with sizes of companies, whether it's a startup or a scale up, whether it's, pre-seed, seed, Series A, like all of these are, kind of shift a little bit. I'd say most of our companies we work with the founder, co-founders, or, teams of 1 to 10. Yep. Some of our portfolio companies now, when we invested in them, they were those small companies, and now they're much larger. Yep. So we work with them as they scale, and that's sort of our specialty is taking something where they have something. Maybe it's usually it's highly technical, so it could be like a professor at a UVM that has a patent. They have an engineering background. They've never started a business before. Right. So we help get them. Maybe it's a co-founder. Maybe it's capital. Maybe it's lab space. Could be any of those things or all of them to help them really get something that works.
And what is the biggest challenge you think most entrepreneurs are hitting right now? Is it capital? Is it people? Is it space? You hit on a few of those.
Yeah.
What's the biggest hurdle for folks?
Yeah, I think the easy answer is capital, but I don't think that's necessarily true. I think it depends on the business. I think the hardest thing is getting something sticky, getting that traction, getting your first few customers. Maybe it's going from like $1 million in sales to $10 million in sales, right? So it's really that sustainable growth. And for some, it's, hiring the right people at the right time, figure out the capital path. So a lot of folks come to us thinking they need venture capital, and I honestly spend more time talking them out of it. Because it's terrifying, it's risky, it's takes a ton of energy. For founders, if you're going to raise capital, that's your full-time job. So everything else kind of has to be set aside to make that happen. So I have a hard time saying that there's one big problem, but those are some of the trends that I see.
And you mentioned talking people out of something. Is there a lot of hard conversations to have with people and just, realize maybe this isn't what you think it is, or, how does that go sometimes?
Totally. And that's something that I've really fallen in love with. And we joke that a lot of times advising with business owners is like therapy, right? Talking them through something. Sometimes I have the easiest job in the world. Well, they'll tell me, I spoke with an entrepreneur yesterday who has an acquisition offer, and she basically just wanted to talk through it with me. And I'm like, you just gave yourself the advice. She knew her gut was telling her. Exactly. She just needed to say it out loud. So sometimes it's that. But, occasionally people do come to me with something where it's not going to be viable, either because they haven't found the right customer, the product's not well defined, they haven't validated enough. That's usually the case where, and that happens most often with technical founders. It's like, I can build this software, so I'm going to build it. And is an advantage in some ways. It saves you a lot of money, but what happens is they overbuild something that no one wants.
Right.
So if you're not a technical founder, you have to figure out creative ways to prove that it's a good enough idea for someone to give you capital to build it, or to convince someone else to come on with you and build it for you.
Right.
And so I think a lot of magic happens there, because if you can get 100 people to say, I'm going to buy this software as soon as it's available. Like, I need this. This is solving a huge problem. And then you can go to investors and say, see, I talked to, 150 customers and 120 of them said they'd buy this tomorrow.
Yeah.
That's validation that typically a technical founder wouldn't do. They would just start building something.
Right.
And you mentioned, go ahead.
Yeah, sort of that minimal viable product, to get something out there and test the market, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think people overthink or overlook that because it's not that sexy, right? And it's awkward and it's uncomfortable and it feels at the time like you're not doing much, you're not making a lot of progress, but it is just the most important thing ever to test that out and make sure that you have something people want.
And you sort of get it though, because it's like, it's their baby, right? And so you want it to be perfect in every single aspect, And
and I think that gets back to what you were asking me, is that I do have to have hard conversations with people, and you never have to say this is a bad idea, which, there's been times where I that's sort of my gut reaction is like, this is not a good idea, but really that's not what it's about, because I might not be your customer, right? So I might not care about this problem that you're solving. But a lot of the times it's like, well, have you done your customer discovery? Have you gone out there and talked and interviewed people to see if they actually want this? The other thing is, have you done a competitor landscape? Have you seen what else is out there? With that one, it's often like, there's nothing out there like this. And I'm like, that, first of all, that is usually not a good sign.
Right.
Second of all, it's probably not true. You might not have a direct competitor, but you'll probably have an indirect competitor. There is some way that people are solving this problem right now. It might not be a great solution, but they're doing it somehow.
Yeah.
And for the tech individuals, my youngest son's a computer science major, and I know sometimes I'll get on the phone with him, he'll just start going, and I'll just walk away. And But for you have an idea, you have a vision, but is some of that process that you help with the marketing piece and gathering that data, where, like you said, it's their baby, I know this is good, but they might not know how to convey that to people in a way that they can understand it.
Yeah, we definitely help them figure that out. I'd say we're very strategic advisors, so we're not going to sit down with them and do their marketing for them or do their financial projections for them. But a lot of times what we can do is help them realize, you have the product, you have the patents, you're the technical person. Now you need to go find people that are good at the things you're not good at. And that doesn't necessarily have to be a co-founder, because finding the right co-founder is like a unicorn. But it could be an advisory board. It could be 3 or 4 people that are really good at the things that you're not good at. And I think for founders that don't realize that think they can do it themselves but can't, those are the hard conversations. But typically it's a scientist who wants to stay in the lab, and they're like, we need to find a CEO to do this because I want to stay in the lab. And that it's more of helping them kind of figure out, okay, how can we go about that? What's sort of the next step?
You mentioned acquisitions earlier. Do you see people wanting to ramp something up as fast as they can to sell it? Or do you see more people who want to keep the baby, if you will, and no, I want to carry this on? And maybe in your years of experience, has that shifted?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked that. I think one of the things that I do in my advising that is sometimes the most valuable thing I can do is ask that question. Do you want this to be a lifestyle business that's going to pay you a nice kind of salary and keep your family afloat, and maybe you can sell it to employees or something down in 20 years, or do you want to put the pedal to the metal, get this thing scaled, and get an acquisition within 5 years? And there's other options as well, but those are sort of a couple of the most common ones, and that is the first thing I ask them, and there's this pause where they're like, oh, well I don't know, because they're so wrapped up in the idea, the product, the service, whatever it is, that they kind of forgot to ask themselves that. And that question determines everything I can help them with. So I can't help you with your capital path if you don't know what your kind of end goal is. And you don't need to decide right away, but for example, if you want a lifestyle business where you're going to do it for the next 20 years, venture capital is really not a good path for you,
right.
because that's all about getting the capital back to the investors as quickly as possible. Yeah. Let's say you're kind of middle of the road. You're undecided how long you want to do it, but you want to scale it and make some money on it. You could do some venture, but it would have to be pretty patient capital. Right. Like investors like VCET that are, we're okay to be in it for 7 years to get you where you need to be. If we get a 3x return, that would be great. Whereas, other investors are shooting for the moon, right? Yeah. So you just have to really know what you want in order to figure out what capital path might be right for you, what you can invest in the business, how aggressively to build your product, that kind of thing.
Yeah, what's kind of that roadmap like if somebody that's got like the sticky idea, right, and they reach out to you to get started or get help? What's that kind of look like?
Yeah, it depends on what their needs are, and that's usually what I try to figure out first. Is it capital? Are you looking for just advice? Do you need to build your team? Sometimes it's a combination of all three of those things. I think most often it's they need capital, but they don't really know what road to go down. And so what I usually try to advise, and again, it depends on the company and the product, but non-dilutive capital is always the best bet. So that's typically grants. It could be prize money. It could be certain types of crowdfunding. So basically you're getting free money to build your company or product. Another good one is finding a technical co-founder that you can build the business with and maybe do some sort of dynamic equity split to make sure that it's fair ownership wise. Yep. And that, that is technically dilutive, but you're not paying cash up front, right? And then there's, the whole fundraising process. If you do decide that, okay, I want to raise capital, I need to raise capital for this product, it's figuring out a couple of things. And for me, the most important thing is how much, for what, and when. Those are kind of the first few things that we talk about in terms of once we get over okay, you definitely do need to raise capital. Yeah. It makes sense for this business. You've exhausted all other options, your friends, your family, your grants, everything else. Yeah. Then we kind of figure out those three things, because what isn't effective is when you approach investors and you don't really know how much you want to raise and you don't really know when you want to close the round and you're not totally sure how you're going to use the capital. If you are iffy on any three of those, do not raise capital.
Yeah. And Shark Tank's last option.
Right.
Yes. It's worked for a couple of Vermont companies, but I wouldn't go down that route first, no.
And when it comes to employees, we have a lot of different companies that come through that we talk to. And one of the things we ask people, especially in the trades, is just having trained employees. Is that a hurdle for some of these startup companies? I mean, finding the right staff in Vermont?
Yeah, I think actually, and we can talk about this a bit further, I think the ecosystem of startups in Vermont is better than it's ever been right now. Right. Because we have so many of these great companies, it means we have a lot of talent here, and it means the talent has options. Yep. Obviously housing, other issues about keeping those people here. But I think we actually have a pretty good pool of talent here. And also there's so much more flexibility now with hybrid and remote options. Right, true. I think one issue is just solo founders that are starting a company are really, really afraid to make their first hire.
Yep. Right.
It's scary for good reason, but also I think there's a lot of ambiguity around it, and we can be a lot more clear on how does that work? What does it mean? What do I need to have ready to go? And there's a lot of work that needs to be done to make it easier, right? Like legislation around healthcare for employees and all that kind of stuff really helps with those early hires.
Well, it's interesting because our previous
perfect.
our previous guests, they were talking about how what Drew asked them, what's the one thing, they've been in business 10 years, what's the one thing you would have done differently? And they said hire sooner. And that was their big thing. They did it by themselves for so long, and they're like, if we could go back, we would have just bit the bullet and gone in and hired that staff.
Hire good people sooner.
Totally. Right. Hire slow, fire fast, right? And I think one of the things that I talk a lot with entrepreneurs about as well is I think that there is a perception that you need to have the perfect right hire and have all of their benefits and this is their salary and this is how I hire someone, which is great. I agree. But there are so many stepping stones to get to that place. The most obvious, and I think one of the absolute superpowers of Vermont, is students. So every school in Vermont has different programs, internship programs, credit programs, even some like salary matches to get undergrads into companies to help. And we, at VCET, we've hired a number of students, UVM, Champlain, Middlebury, to help us we might hire them for the summer and then they ended up staying on as, you know, actually for my podcast, my audio engineer has worked for me for like 5 or 6 years. He doesn't even live in Vermont anymore. But that is make or break early on because first of all, it gives us you're paying it forward to the community because these students are getting experience with these companies. You're getting pretty affordable labor. We always believe in paid internships, but you know it does help a lot, and it helps you get used to managing someone, to figuring out what the needs are, to kind of see the gaps and what it will take to hire someone full time. And the number of entrepreneurs I talk to weekly that are like, I'm like, you should hire a Middlebury student to do this, or you should hire, especially when it's like marketing, social media, sales, like, and they're, they're like, I never thought about that for a startup. Like I think about it for a large organization. Many of the large organizations in our state are great. They all have like very buttoned up internship programs, but you have to remember that all of the career centers at these schools have people whose job it is to match students with opportunities, even if it's just you and your startup. So that's one where I think it's really underutilized in the state.
And with an employee thing, is it kind of like a chicken and the egg thing where as more technology grows in Vermont, and it has over the last couple of decades, more young people aren't going to leave, but also more people are going to come in. And I think we're seeing it like a beta, you know. We've had a couple clients recently who are like, oh, they're buying houses in Vermont. You ask where you work, I work at Beta. So do you think that's kind of the, you know, you have to have that in order to bring those people in, or?
Yeah, so I use this interest, I've used this before and I stole it from Dave, but when I started at VCET 2016-ish, Dave used to say that there were, in terms of companies in Vermont, there were freshmen and seniors. We didn't have any sophomores or juniors.
Yeah, right. Interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
And everyone I said, they're like, oh, I'm like, yeah, it's so good. That's why I stole it from him. But it's so true. And that's, I think, what was really scary. And that time I had a bunch of, I was in my, you know, mid to late 20s. We won't get specific. And a bunch of my friends lived here and loved it. And then they got to a place where like they were getting close to 30 and didn't want roommates and didn't want you know, they wanted to have their own things in their own space and a car and all this stuff. And the salaries just weren't matching. And now a huge shift has happened, and now we have those sophomores and juniors. We have companies that have maybe 30 to 75 people, right, that can pay a decent salary, a little bit higher than we could, 8 years ago. And the biggest thing is there's options, because if you don't get the dream job at Beta, or you get the dream job at Beta and ends up not being the dream job, you might be able to go work for Benchmark, right? So that is huge, and that's huge for families, especially spouses needing other options. So again, I think it comes back to housing, major issue to make sure we have that. Affordable childcare, another issue, but like I do see this momentum of people that are coming here and they have options all of a sudden. It's not like, well, if you don't get the job at dealer.com, then what are you going to do, right? So that is really, really exciting to me, and I think that's one of the major shifts. And having places like VCET and Hula where people can meet these companies and share skills and resources, and a lot of these companies too are sharing resources with each other, and that's huge. I think that's made a massive change for the better.
How do we go forward, looking at your crystal ball? There's always the conversation of the two Vermonts. There's Chittenden County and everything else. From an entrepreneur standpoint, from a technology standpoint, how do we grow that out to the Northeast Kingdom, to Southern Vermont, Franklin County? Like, how does that become more of a reality where all of Vermont is seeing this as opposed to just the northwest corner?
Yeah, I think we have to keep that front of mind. I think we need to understand that that is an issue, and for us, we are looking in every corner of the state for startups. We have one company that we started working with a couple years ago that, and we have really tried hard to say we serve all of Vermont, right? Even though we're based in Burlington, and we ended up meeting this husband-wife team founder there in North Springfield. Mm-hmm. We invested in them. They have grown beautifully over the last couple of years, with these amazing jobs that have healthcare and, retirement benefits and all that good stuff in North Springfield.
Yeah.
And that's happening more and more. And I think telling those stories is really important, and knowing that those jobs are there is really important, and utilizing our sort of network of these innovation hubs. So in Burlington, you have VCET, you have Hula, but there's also, Brick in Springfield, there's Due North in Lyndonville, there's the Space on Main in Bradford. So these are all some sort of like co-working, makerspace, hybrid, we call them kind of innovation spaces, that are designed to bring those types of people together to create opportunities. So I think if we can kind of support those hubs around the state, that really does help. And we have those kind of champions. And for VCET, we try to give them a small grant to help them, buy some furniture and get started, or it might be giving advice to the director. It might be offering up discounts that we have to our startups to their startups. So I think supporting those hubs is a great way, and we try to stay connected and make sure that we're sharing deals and that kind of thing. But it's always front of mind.
And to go from the crystal ball to the magic wand, what's the one thing that VCET, if there was one thing you could have to really push things forward? And we talked about before, it's money, it seems to always be the easy answer.
Yeah.
But what would it be for the next 5 years of?
I think it's housing. We're so sick of hearing that. I know, but I think that's a huge barrier for a lot of folks, and transportation's another one, right, to rural areas, so that we can connect people, is that you can come in to Burlington one day a week and have that be an easy thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I love that, kind of early on when you were talking, you mentioned that, Vermont it's a good time to start something in Vermont, and it's a receptive state. That's not always the perception that you hear out there. It's like the common hot take in the news is, Vermont doesn't like businesses, and here's Vermont again trying to make it hard to grow a business or start a business. But I love coming in and talking with folks that have real feet on the ground, and that's not the scenario. What do you think we need to do to sort of change that perception?
I think storytelling is really important. What you guys are doing here, what I'm doing on my podcast with Start Here, because we need to tell these stories. And I think the number of people have come to me and said, oh my God, I listened to this episode about this person. I had no idea that was there, and so cool. And I ended up reaching out, and storytelling is so important. Yeah. And I think that really changes people's perceptions. We have people that listen to our podcast that are in San Francisco but want to move back to Vermont, and it's how they kind of keep tabs on what companies are exciting and what they might want to come back and do. So I think that's a big piece of it.
We're more breweries and maple syrup. We're not just breweries and maple syrup.
So that was going to be my next question. Yeah. Tell us about your podcast.
Yeah, okay. Start Here is for active, aspiring, and accidental entrepreneurs. Yep. So we focus on people who have started businesses in the state. We've been doing it since 2016, which is awesome. Crazy. Yeah. But you guys are, you're way more professional than we are when we started.
I hope we're still doing this 8 years from now.
Right? I know. Right? Well, it's so fun, and it's so important. There's a few sort of business podcasts in the state, and they're all so different. And we've actually had, John Toda has a great one, and we've had him on ours, and he's been on, so it's just, I think storytelling will only become more important. And you can listen to Start Here anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Love it.
Fantastic. Anything else? Anything we missed? Anything you want to add?
I don't think so. I think folks who are interested in starting businesses, or are feeling intimidated by venture capital, or are just kind of interested in what we do, I'm happy to speak with anyone.
Where can they find you?
Sam at VCET.co.
Cool.
And let's get a male field hockey
Yeah,
Please.
team going, right?
Team going.
Absolutely. I'll be your coach.
Yeah. Well, as we close every show, if you happen to know any guest out there that is doing outstanding work in their communities, we would love to have them send a name our way and we'll reach out.